Hello, everyone. I'm Sarah from Mappy Hour, and I am so excited for tonight's Maker Series. We are about to interview Gabriella, and before we do, I want to say thanks to Sierra Nevada for supporting this entire series. This specific one with Hop Splash, which is one of their new non-alcoholic drinks, and we've been having a lot of fun having that at Mappy Hour events as an option for those who don't want to drink a beer or aren't drinking at all. And I also just wanted to say welcome to Mappy Hour. If you haven't been part of the community before, we are trying to get people who live in cities into the great outdoors. And so that could look like going on a group hike in Brooklyn or going on a camping trip by public transit from Chicago. So if you are in one of our cities, New York, Chicago, DC, Denver, Seattle, please sign up and look at what our chapters have going on because we'd love to see you out there. So that's it for announcements. Really excited to get into this interview. Hello, Gabriella.
Hi, so happy to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Of course. So, yeah, we met over the internet, which has been great, but I'm very excited to dive a little bit deeper into who you are and how your company came to be. So, to kick it off, let's do like a really quick, if someone just signed on and didn't read what this is about, what is the company that you started?
Yeah, so it's called Sky Above Trail Grub, and we make plant-based dehydrated meals. And I'm in the Portland area, so my focus is supporting farmers in Portland Metro. And it's packaged in compostable bags, so they can be composted in your home composting pile. You can just put your compost scraps in it, like while you're backpacking, bring it home, throw it in the compost pile, and it will turn back into soil in about 6 months to grow more food, to make more food.
Awesome. And I can't wait to dive a little deeper into all those things that you mentioned, those details. But I wanted to just like set that up to get started so that we can really go back. We're going back to your childhood to kick it off. Tell us about your connection to nature. How did you first feel connected, or did you have experiences growing up where you got to spend time in nature?
Yeah, so I was super privileged to be able to hike and camp and fish with my family. And I recently started exploring this with my dad, like asking him, how did you get into all this stuff? Like, how did you know how to fish and, have the desire to take me and my brother out to go camping? And my dad is from Nicaragua, and he immigrated here in the 70s. And he came through war. He didn't know that he was going to be in Michigan, is where he had some family. His tia, she lived in Michigan, and she had gotten like a full ride scholarship to go to U of M. So that's how she ended up there from Manawa. And then she through her time in Michigan, she was living in like a more rural area. So my dad would go spend time with her. And then that's kind of how he was always outdoors anyway, just growing up. And so then he just learned fishing and camping and how to set up a tent and all of that. And so when he and my mom met, they started doing adventures together. And then that was just really a huge focus of my childhood, was taking us out. So growing up in Michigan, we would go to like up north is what we call it. So not maybe as far as like the UP, but like Traverse City area, like all along the lake. We would travel to see the rest of my family who was in Boca Raton, and we would camp all along the way. So like in Ohio, Kentucky, and then like fishing in Ontario as well. So yeah, I've always really felt comfortable in that space. Everything we did was like food and nature focused. So always outside or always cooking or both. My mom would just like go all out, bring all of the like camp kitchen, like set it up. So super extra, which is like definitely where I get it. Um, so yeah, I mean, that was my childhood, and I just feel really grateful for that.
Yeah. That's amazing. So since you were young, food and the outdoors has been to get like interwoven together and part of your life.
Yeah. And like cooking over fire, making fire. And it's something that I didn't realize until later, like a lot of kids don't experience. Um, so that's kind of like led me down the path later in life of helping people get acquainted to those experiences or like feel more comfortable in the outdoors.
Yeah. Yeah, what specific skills or information do you find most helpful in bringing people who might not have had those experiences into the outdoors or helping them feel more comfortable?
Yeah, there's so much, and it feels really overwhelming. And um, the ways that I can relate to that now are like getting into a new activity, like climbing. I just got into rock climbing maybe like 5 years ago, and so that kind of like beginner overwhelm of like, oh my gosh, there's way too much to know. Like, how am I even gonna um, start? Like, where am I even gonna start with this? And then also like outdoor communities in general just being really toxic and gatekeepy and exclusive and like super white dominated spaces. And that's super intimidating. Um, so it's just like going back to basics, like, okay, how do I even choose a trail that I want to go on? Like, what are some resources? So like showing people all trails, so then it can be like within their realm of experience. Like, oh, I just want to do like a 1 mile hike or whatever. Or I'll just give them like a list of suggestions, and be very transparent about like the skill level or like what the terrain is going to be like. Because I feel like, especially with group hikes or things like that, if it's not like a trauma informed space and people are going into a group setting, it can be also really overwhelming of like what to expect. And maybe something is a little bit outside of what they're used to or what they were expecting. And so it can be challenging. And then if your heart rate is getting up and, you can't get oxygen in and it's just a
Yeah,
whole
you're in the
lot
middle of
of,
nowhere.
yeah. So just like talking about all of that up front so folks know what to expect, and then just asking them like where they're at. Like, have you ever set up a tent before? Have you ever like packed a backpack before? Like maybe people don't even like know what footwear to buy. So like it's starting there. Like come to REI with me, or like let's go to the used gear store and find proper footwear. Figuring out like food, like how much water am I gonna need? What kind of snacks am I gonna need? So it's really just like sitting down with that person or group of people and asking them where they're at.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so awesome because I feel like a lot of the outdoor I don't know if it's the industry or the outdoor spaces that have a lot of assumptions that are just made about where people are, where they're coming from, how they define things. Like, just the word outdoorsy is really packed and
Yes.
full of assumptions. And so it's really cool that you are actively like trying to strip that away and just communicate directly with where people are and what they're looking for. And, yeah, it's awesome work. So one
Yeah, it's
direct.
super important because we want people, right, to like feel comfortable in these spaces and
Yeah.
want to come back and want to engage more. And like we all deserve to be in these spaces. Like we all come from these spaces, and it's not separate from us. And so, you know, you can't just tell someone that though. Like they have to feel that. So, what is a how can we create a space where people feel safe? And again, the word safe, like that's not up to you as a facilitator to decide if it's a safe space. Like, but what are the ways that we can like strive towards that and check in with people to see how they're feeling?
And have that feedback.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think food is a really good, because that is your specific, focus. I think food like, when we do events, food is always a huge stressor. Um, and it's really hard if you're new to even, like, know where to start because it is also, like, very gear intensive. Not
Mm-hmm.
necessarily, but, if you kind of go down the rabbit hole of like, what do I need? And I need this tong and I need this little thing to wipe it out. And like, you know what I mean? I feel like there's like hiking at least to me, feels a lot more straightforward of like, okay, like you need some shoes and like a backpack. And then like cooking opens this whole different chapter of like, what are all the things that you need? And there's so many different, oh, are you cast iron cooking over a fire? And I don't know. That is something like at least I've noticed in our communities have been like, big point of just overwhelm, I think. So is that something that you've like seen as well, I guess, is the first question. And then also like we're like totally skipping ahead here. I do want to go back to talk about like your history with food, but like when you create your packaging and your marketing and all of that, how do you approach kind of that sentiment if that is something you've also noticed?
Yeah, totally. That's a really good question. And some of the questions what what I was asking when I was creating this product, because it started out just like as for me, I was making food that I wanted to eat because I wasn't able to find that food like in REI or any gear stores that I could just grab off the shelf, and something quick and easy that doesn't weigh so much, like cans of soup or things like that, or like just bringing vegetables into the backcountry, which I still do. I mean, having fresh fruit is like such a treat. um, but yeah, that like weight concept, because once you start packing up your bag, like, yeah, it gets heavy very quickly. So yeah, these are the questions that I was asking just people in my community, like what are your struggles um, with this, and what are the barriers to like cooking, or like, yeah, just what are your struggle points? And a lot of folks, yeah, struggled with, you know, packing too much weight.
Mm,
And then also a lot of people didn't want to do dishes, which
yeah.
makes a lot of sense to me. I totally get that. So people wanted a pouch that you could just eat the food out of and maybe reuse it again for something else. Like I was saying, like pack out your scraps or your trash in that. Um, or, I mean, you could probably reuse it twice, like if you had another something that you wanted to heat up in there. Um, but then it will start to biodegrade because that's what it's supposed to do. But yeah, I've heard a lot of folks say like, oh, I want to get into backpacking, but I don't know what to bring, or like every time I go out, I bring the same thing, or I just eat ramen and then I feel like crap afterwards. And so just, yeah, helping folks understand that there's a better way, and there's, you know, foods that you can eat that are going to help you feel good and also like give you energy and not bog you down or like give you a stomach ache. Cause that's like the worst thing, right? If you eat stuff that you maybe even don't normally eat when you're back home or in the front country or whatever, and then you just have like digestive upset. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of like little gear things. Even if you're car camping, then you are worrying about like keeping a cooler and changing out the ice, and like how many days are you going to be gone. So it's just nice to have access to something that is shelf stable, it doesn't weigh a lot, and you don't have to worry about any of that stuff. Just like a way to get water, and sometimes that's even stressful, like
Yeah.
looking at your map, like, am I going to have access to water the whole time? If not, like strategically planning, like, when am I going to gather my water? So yeah, there's like a ton of moving parts. And it's another one of those things that could lead to overwhelm and then shut down. And then people are like, I'm not even going to try to go.
Yeah.
Especially if, a lot of people don't even cook at home. If they don't like cooking at home,
Yeah.
they're not going to like cooking at their
It's
camping.
even harder. Yeah.
Yeah.
Figuring out how to put all your food into tiny little containers and then
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly. Measure every little thing out. Like, I don't even like doing that,
Yeah.
which is why I created this, because it's just, yeah, too much.
Yeah. That totally makes sense. And I know we got out of order with the questions, but I want to go into kind of the process of making the food. You made a really awesome reel that we got to share on Instagram, which everyone should go check out if you haven't seen it already. But if you are able to explain kind of how you go through the process of even let's say with sourcing recipe to packaging, um, would love to know kind of what goes through your head. How do you plan this? Why are you picking certain recipes instead of others? And of course, where are you getting the food? Because I know that's a really important part of your work.
Yeah. So at the beginning, I was just testing recipes for myself. I didn't like have a business idea and then try to plug in recipes into that of like, oh, I'm creating for this business. It was like me just experimenting for me and my friends.
Mm.
And honestly, it started with the three sisters. And this was a spin just off of a gallo pinto, which is a traditional rice and beans dish in Nicaragua. And my grandma would make it all the time for like breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I was like so sick of it when she would watch this. I'm like, we're eating beans and rice all day. Now I'm like, that's all I want to eat all day.
Yeah, especially after a long day hiking.
Yeah, it's just so comforting and good, and has like all the nutrients you need. And but yeah, so it started with that. And then I was kind of just playing with ingredients that I had more access to in the Pacific Northwest. So it's like a blend of like my ancestral foods with now place of like where I reside now. And so like that's a space that I really love to play in. Of like, how can I bring some like ancestral foods or like cooking methods or anything, and then meet it with what's available to me like seasonally in the Pacific Northwest.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of like how a lot of my recipes start. And then I really love spices. And so I'm always experimenting with different flavors. And so, yeah, I just started like throwing some different spices in there and playing with that and the different ratios. And then the Three Sisters burrito bowl was born. And that was also inspired by the ancestral planting in Mesoamerica of corn, beans, and squash, just Turtle Island in general.
Were any of these recipes that your mom used to make when you would go camping?
No, not really. It's so funny because I don't remember exactly the foods that she would make. I remember there was always food, but I can't remember like specific things. I remember like she would just go all out with breakfast. Like there'd always be pancakes camping. I'm like, okay. And like fresh fruit and yeah. But yeah, I couldn't tell you like what she was making, but I was eating it.
Yeah.
That's actually a good talking point for us. Like I would like to go back and revisit that with her. Maybe we could make a book. That would be really cool.
That would be amazing.
Yeah, of camp
I
recipes.
feel like there's something there of like, okay, here's how she would do with all the different like bowls or like, you know, cookware, and then you have like a packaged version.
Yeah,
next generation of food. I don't know.
I love that. Yeah, I want to explore that. Someone told me recently, they were like, you need to write a cookbook. So maybe that's the start.
We'll have you back on with your mom.
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, so the recipes, honestly, I'm a private chef by day in my day job. So I'm always just experimenting with different things. And someone asked me recently, like, because I come up with a different menu every single week for my clients, like a menu like tailored to them and like their dietary needs. And sometimes I'll use like Pinterest or cookbooks or whatever, but other times I'm just like, these things sound good together. And then I've never made it. And then I just throw it together and intuitively, like I don't use recipes, and I really like want to host more cooking classes where that's the focus, like because it is a huge catalyst for trusting your intuition. Because a lot of the times, especially like if you don't have a lot of experience cooking or you didn't grow up cooking, like you want to know, like, am I doing it right? Are these the exact ratios? And like I totally get that, but I encourage people, like I won't tell them. I'm not going to be like, put a tablespoon of that, or maybe that will be my cookbook too. I'm just going to list the ingredients. Like you don't get the breakdown of the measurements, because I think that's like decolonizing recipes, right? Because we're like, our grandmas, like they were writing the recipe books. Like they were just cooking. And maybe not all of our grandmas, but somewhere down the line, that's just what we did, right? Like we had to cook our own food. We didn't have access to all of this ready-made stuff that we could just grab. So it was a lot of just adding, and I think I'm probably getting way off topic, but it was just
it's okay. I have like 10 questions about what you just said. I'm trying really hard not to interrupt.
Yeah, it's just like adding things together and seeing what happened and learning from that and trusting your intuition. And there's never like a mistake, you know. You're just like, oh, trying that, like, oh, that was too salty, like next time I'm gonna add less salt, but I still have food on my table, you
Right.
know. And it was still an experience. And like food is so alive, and I like to think of food as a relative. And so, you know, you're just interacting with food, and there's like all of these plants coming together, and it's literal alchemy, you know. You're like combining these flavors, all the elements coming together, the flame you're using to cook, water, like salt, minerals from the earth, the sun, the fire, like that fire coming down and infusing into the plants. And when you like actually stop to think about it, I was just like deep in cooking the other day and was like, wow, like everything that we create from like whole foods, like nothing obviously that's been processed or has like additives in it, but everything that we um, create from the earth and like the sea, um, that it comes from the earth, like, and you can make flavors with like so many different it's
Yeah.
just mind-blowing to me. I don't know if anyone else is like
No, totally.
understanding
Like,
this,
okay, one
but
thing that got me recently, and I'm pretty sure this is a fact, that paprika is just mashed up red, like crushed red pepper, like refined.
yeah.
Like
Mhm.
stuff like that, where it's like it's this like it's just like
Yeah.
processed like or like ground differently and like offers something completely different. I don't know if
And
that's
then
what you're
people
getting at,
smoke
but it blew my mind.
paprika, and then it changes the whole entire
Yeah,
flavor profile. Yeah.
yeah.
And it's just amazing to me that there's like just endless combinations of
For
spices and foods and plants, and that we can create art and flavor and just something we can taste, art we can taste. I don't know. It's just
yeah,
incredible to me.
yeah. No, I could tell, like, when you talk about food, you're just, like, l light up in a certain way, which is amazing because you seem to cook a lot.
Yeah.
But it is, like I don't know, I think that when you're saying the intuition thing, I definitely resisted a lot because 'cause I've cooked, like, a lot of really bad meals, but I feel like
Mhm.
I feel like there is, like, a craft piece to it that if you, like, have a specific like, you have to know certain skills, but then once you know those, like, is there, like, a foundation upon which you grow from, if that makes sense? Do you
Yeah,
think that we
totally.
just know inside or we can learn, and I guess?
Yeah. I think it's like a lot of things like we intuitively know how to do them. There's just so much like I don't know, like gunk over that
Mm,
we like need to like sift through in order to get to it.
yeah,
Um and yeah, that can be a really daunting and lifelong process, you know, of doing that. And yeah, it definitely seems intimidating because it feels like there's a lot to know, and there is. Like you're saying, it's like good to have some knife skills and get acquainted with just simply that, like how to chop
yeah,
vegetables, like um and like properly, so you're not going to cut your hands off or your fingers off, but like um or like you know basic things like sautéing or braising or steaming, like what all those things mean, and then like basic kitchenware, like what are the most basic things I should have to even get started. um but then, yeah, as far as like trusting your intuition and like, yeah, making meals that you're like, oh, that wasn't so great.
yeah.
Maybe inedible, like borderline inedible. But you're probably like a better cook now. I
Yeah.
mean, maybe not, but
Oh, you
um,
learn for sure.
yeah, exactly. Just by doing, and I've always been that way. I know like not everyone is. Like some people really need that breakdown, and that's okay if that's where you're at and that's where you want to start. But it's like building to that um, as a goal, like
Yeah.
trusting your intuition with it.
Right, and that's a whole different process, right? That it can happen outside the
Yeah,
kitchen.
yeah, and I mean it's that's the thing too. It's like we can't really compartmentalize any parts of our life. It's
Yeah.
other things trickle in, and so I think it's like a metaphor a lot of like how we handle other situations in life, or um yeah, there's like deep spiritual meanings behind things too, so
Yeah. I feel like we could go on a whole different tangent too about, like,
for sure.
spirituality and food, but I wanna bring us back. One question I had when you were talking about the local food that you were getting is, does that mean that certain recipes are seasonal, or are you making enough while XYZ vegetable is in season that someone could order it in December or something like that?
Yeah, so I do like slow down a lot. I pretty much like end in September and take like September through February, March off. Um, and so it is like really limited batch because it is just me. Like I don't have any employees. Like I'm doing all the cooking, the selling at the market, the online stuff, the social media engagement. So I'm trying, like, I'm at this place of like figuring out what my own capacity is with that. Um, and so, yeah, as of it's been for like the past couple years, yes, I'll just make like a lot, like bigger batches of things when they're in season. And, it's shelf stable for at least a year, but honestly, probably more. Um, and kind of a quick uh, side thing with that is a lot of people aren't sure about the difference between like dehydrated and freeze dried food. So most of like what you're finding in REI is freeze dried. So that's using cold to dry something very quickly. And so what that does is it makes it shelf stable for a lot longer than dehydrated food. So you're not as worried about like the moisture content. Um, that could be still trapped within that food because there's something that happens in dehydration specifically called case hardening, and that's where like something appears to be dehydrated on the outside, but there's actually like very small water molecules still trapped on the inside. So then if you package that, it's just going to mold. So that's something that I had no idea of
Yeah.
until I talked to the health department, and they were like, "Oh, have you done your water testing yet?" And I was like, "What is that?" So I had to
Yeah.
like send it into a lab and make sure that it was like
Oh,
below a certain number. But anyway, with freeze drying, that's like less likely to happen. But the reason why I went with dehydration versus freeze drying, which one is freeze dryers are really expensive, like thousands of dollars just for like a small one.
yeah.
Um, so dehydrating was just more accessible to me financially. And then two, being a chef, I was a lot more concerned with flavor than longevity because I'm not making these for prep kits, although if people want to buy them for that, like totally cool, but it's just not going to last as long as freeze dried food. So if you plan on just having it over there for the earthquake or whatever,
Yeah.
then it's probably not the best choice for that, unless you're going to like swap it out every year. Um, but yeah, the flavor and texture is much more preserved with dehydrated foods. You're going to get that home cooked taste where it's freeze dried. It turns all into one texture. It's that kind of like mush. You don't get the complexity of flavor.
Yeah.
And it's like that freeze dried food or like backpacking food that we're all used to being like, ew, that does not
Yeah,
taste
there's, like,
good.
some texture, you're like, "I guess that's chicken." Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. You're like, maybe. And then
Please,
also,
no.
like, their process, they will like freeze dry all those ingredients separately and then they'll add like spices in on top. So like none of it's like melded together. And then with like cooking in the chef world, you're like salting at different stages of the cooking process. So you're getting like that depth of flavor, not just like salt dumped on top of your meal.
Right.
So
I feel like a
I can't
lot of
remember
those
where we were
too.
going, but
Go ahead, sorry. What was that?
I can't remember where we were going, but that was like my kind of side
Yes.
tangent about dehydration.
I was asking, like, other questions. I'll bring us back, but I was gonna say, like, this is not something I know a ton about other than just being, like, a user as a backpacker. My experience has been that most people are just looking for, like, calories, and
Yeah,
they're not valuing the food in the way that you're talking about. So it's really cool that you have this other option on the market for people who do value taste and quality, as well
totally.
as lightweight, and calories and all that other stuff.
Yeah, that's a good point because I do get people that are like $17 for a bag. They don't get, they're not my customer. Like
Right.
they're not caring about the flavor. Like yeah, they're just kind of thinking about the calories and there's Mountain House for those people. I mean,
McDonald's. Those don't go bad. Just kidding. This is not an endorsement for McDonald's. But there are lots of options if you really don't care what you're putting in your body or where you get it from.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. There's a ton of options for those things.
Yeah.
No shortage.
Okay, we're bringing you back. All right. So you you start cooking to create Three Sisters. This is like the first kind of like staple recipe. You make it for yourself. You figure out how to dehydrate. That's where we're at in your journey. So how does it go from that to
Yeah.
like now you have this business with multiple recipes and the work you're doing now?
Yeah, it all happened so fast. I feel like this was like 2018 that this all like really started to come together more like yeah 20 end of 2018 2019 I was going through a huge transition. My fiance died in July of 2018, so like my entire life was turned upside down.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, I don't know where I'm going to live. I don't know how I'm going to make money. I need to take time off work. Like, I don't know what I'm doing. Just so many questions and so much of my life up in the air. And that's really like when I turned to the outdoors and connecting with the earth and going deeper into my connection with food as like an anchor point for myself and processing my grief and just like rediscovering myself and what I wanted. So that through that I also started like, just backpacking more, and that's really how I like regained my strength and remembered like what I was capable of and seeing a way forward, because I just felt so like strong out there and like also capable. And it's just a different feeling when you're backpacking. Even I was just like with a group of people, but still like knowing that I could be out there for a few days and have my own back.
Totally.
After like, having another person to kind of balance that out with for so long, it was just like a huge shock to my system. So yeah, through that, like started backpacking more and then eventually rock climbing as a way to process as well. And then doing the recipe development, which wasn't really recipe development at the time. So just like a means for me to provide for myself, and then started sharing that with friends. And then my friends were like, hey, this is really good. Like, you should think about selling this, or like, have you thought about, starting a business with this? And at that point I hadn't. I'd been working in different like healthcare settings for a while. I had graduated from a holistic nutrition program that year, but wasn't sure what I wanted to do. I was doing like food sovereignty work in the community. I knew that I wasn't really into doing I thought that I wasn't into doing like one-on-one consultation at that time. So I was just kind of like, yeah, what's next? How do I incorporate this knowledge that I have with my passions?
Yeah.
And so then I actually started entertaining the idea of starting a business. The most overwhelming thing to me was like, I haven't gone to business school. I don't know the first thing about running a business. I don't know where to start. I suck with numbers. I've never been like someone that's good with money. So it felt like really intimidating. But there are a ton of resources in Portland for entrepreneurs, and like this is a great city for that. And there's like a ton of startups here and a ton of people just running like food businesses. So I started just like talking to my community and asking for resources. And eventually that led me to Mercy Corps. I took like a business foundations class with them. And that helped me like even assess if I wanted to start a business. Like, here's all the things you need to think about.
Which I feel like is really smart, because I feel like a lot of people are like, it's like cool to be a business owner, right? Like there's like this narrative around it, and the actual work of running a business is very different from the product you're creating often. So that's really great that you address that.
Yeah, it's definitely like a romanticized thing. And it looks very glamorous, but it's definitely not. Like, I love it, but there are parts that are a huge struggle for me. Um, but yeah, just starting with like kind of the basics. And then they gave us some tools of like, here's some Excel sheets that you can use to like plug numbers into. Here are some things to like think about, like writing down your target audience and like all of these more kind of like things that I didn't want to focus on. I'm like, I just want to like create and this is fun.
Yeah.
But these are definitely things that are really important to know before you dive in. And because it's a lot harder to figure out later, like if you don't have a bookkeeping system, and
Right.
I'm still like recovering from that, honestly.
Mhm.
So yeah, that really helped me start to think about a lot of my blind spots. And then from there, I was qualified to, because I took that course, I was qualified to apply for their IDA program, which at the time it was a 5-to-1 match. So essentially, if you get chosen, you have to invest $1,000 of your own money into this account, and they'll match it by 5. So at the end, you get $6,000 to start
Cool.
up, and then you have to take all these extracurricular business things. So like there's a certain requirements you have to meet within a certain time frame. During that time frame, that's when COVID happened. And so it was just like, whoa, I'm starting this business, but it doesn't really feel like it now. Like, what is happening? Is this a good idea anymore?
Yeah.
So it did take me like longer than I had like originally intended. But I got through the program and launched like basically a year after I thought that I was going to. And I ended up taking another course with them, which was the business plan workshop. And that's what really like helped my brain, like laying everything out. It felt like more real.
Yeah.
So having that like all set out on paper, like, okay, this feels doable now. Like I have a plan. And then really like running a business became a spiritual practice for me. And ancestral work too. Because then I started exploring like my ancestors' relationship to like currency and
Mm.
what that looked like, as a way to like um, explore it from a different lens for myself, because I've always had like resistance to that, because you're definitely like in these waves of, and we all are, of capitalism, but like how can we do this in a way that like aligns with our values and still feels good, but it's like also okay to make money and to ask for like what your product is worth. That's something that I really struggled with,
Yeah.
and something I still struggle with. So viewing things through that lens and like understanding that starting and doing this business is like also a way for me to break like generational trauma, and also just like deep seated generational things. Like, for example, on my mom's side, like I come from a long line of women who like gave their power away and who like
Mhm.
relied on their partners for income and had like all of these dreams and were really creative, and but they just didn't have like the finances
Yeah.
to start what they wanted to do. And so in a way I feel like I'm doing this for all of them too.
Wow. That's like that's a lot. I mean, it's beautiful, but I'm like just thinking about how much it like mind space and emotions it is to just run a business. And then, you're also going so much deeper with like what this means in terms of like your value system and capitalism, your ancestors. It's awesome. I think yeah, I don't have a good answer on the capitalism thing, but
Let me know when you do.
yeah, here we are. No, I think it's really cool, just from your business, for example, that you're able to spend money with farmers, right? Like you can spend more money with them because you have built this business and hopefully support them more, right? Like, I mean, I don't know your business really well, but that would be like my initial take of like, that's a system that you're building that could potentially have large ramifications. But I know that's just a small piece of a much larger puzzle.
Yeah, and I feel like that's the bare minimum I could do is like support my local farmers. And that's also a piece that has helped me like ask for what it's worth.
Yeah.
And like you said, that people who are of that mindset and are wanting, those are their values as well. Like they totally understand, and there's no questions asked as to like why this.
Oh, wait, I can't hear you. Hmm. Can you hear me?
It's possible that the headphones died.
Okay, I think that's what happened.
Okay. Is the sound still good?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. Sorry about that. But yeah, I feel like it's the bare minimum I can do to support my community. And it has been a struggle, because of inflation and because
Oh,
um I want to source things as locally as I can. It does cost more.
yeah.
So that's been a challenge. And then also climate change, like the thing that I want is not always available. So that's a struggle too. And just helping people understand that it's like because like if you look at my website right now, I'm like out of stock of everything. And that's just because like I haven't been able to get some of the things that I
Mhm.
normally would. And then also, like I said before, it's just me. So it's like my focus is to keep up with my local community first, and then anything that's left over gets offered up on my website. So
Mhm.
I'm trying to figure out a system to where I, um, sorry, there was a noise going on, so I lost my train of thought. But to where I can be like more transparent and upfront about how many meals are going to be available and like when they're going to be on the website. Because
Yeah.
otherwise, I get like a lot of emails and DMs
Mhm.
about like, "Hey, I want some
Right.
camping food for this weekend," and I'm like, "Oh, sorry, it's not going to be available for the
Yeah.
next weeks."
Yeah. It's so I feel like I'm, like, thinking of the companies that do, like, drops. You're like, "Alright, guys, we have a drop coming up." But it's really cool that you have that much demand. I was gonna ask how people have reacted to the pricing, and it sounds like, potentially there is a group of people that are very excited about the product and, willing to pay for it, and then, of course, the people who email you about it being too expensive, which everyone has, I'm
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah, I was fully prepared for that. And, most of the feedback is really good, and most people don't say anything about it. I've had to raise my prices twice since I've launched, which is 2 years. But, like, same thing with my private chefing. Like,
Oh,
the company that I go through, like, they've had to raise their prices twice for the cost of food, and that's just like what it is. So, um, yeah, this honestly is the first year that there's been like a little more talk about it. I think because like of the inflation, and the next tax bracket up is really feeling it this
yeah,
time around. So, but for the most part, when I like start to talk about the food and like my values and like that it's me making it, most people are like, "Oh, okay, like thanks for explaining that to me. Like I really like understand the
yeah,
value."
like, you're talking to the person that is
Yeah.
doing everything and, like
Yeah, and like literally the farmer who I bought the vegetables from is like 2 stalls over,
yeah.
at the market. So,
So do you have like, would you consider growing the business beyond you, or is the fact that you are working with this local farm, and it's you so much part of what the product is that that wouldn't make sense?
yeah, people ask me this question a lot, and I've like met with different like investors and things like that haven't resonated over the years, or like people that just don't get it, or most of the time people are like, "Oh, do you want to like sell an REI, or like do you
Oh,
want to, that's not like an end goal of mine. Like it's really important to me to keep this business like super local. So like the values can remain strong,
mhm,
because like yeah, when you start to scale up, like something has to give.
yeah,
Um and so, yeah, I'm just like in a dreamy space with that right now, and figuring out like what the next couple years look like, because it isn't sustainable for me it just to be me. And I've had like friends, fill in here and there and help me when I have like large orders or things like that. But I would like to have, a couple like part-time employees. And that seems like a lot better to me because honestly, the hardest part is the production of the food.
Mhm.
And because it's like recipes I've already created, I don't get to be super creative.
Yeah,
It's like very production based and like just go in and do this and then package. And
right.
so that part is hard. But yeah, I mean, I'm just like growing very like intentionally. Um, and I think like a common misconception with businesses or like small businesses or startups that like we all want to grow to this like crazy, like huge scale and like make millions of dollars. And like, yeah, that's not what it's really about for me. But again, yeah, it's like staying true to my values, but also wanting it to be sustainable for me and the community because there is such a need. So yeah, just in a really like dreaming space with that now and trying to figure out like what feels good and right and a way forward.
Yeah. And from like the consumer perspective, like no one else is doing this. So like, as someone who's on the East Coast, it's like, well, this would be an amazing thing to have connected with our local farms out here. So I don't know what the system is you built, but we're ready.
Yeah, and I actually talked to someone else at a climbing festival called Flash Foxy, and
Mhm.
they live in New York. I don't know if they know about you, but they were like, "Oh, if you ever thought about like expanding, like I could connect you with some farmers here." And so I think like that would be um the ultimate, to have
Yeah.
like kind of different like chapters, I guess, in different
Yeah.
areas that are like local to them, not just
Yeah.
like me shipping food from Portland to
Right.
New York, which is still cool, that people
Yes.
have access to it. But
Yeah.
yeah, that's like big dreams there.
That
Yeah,
is, yeah.
growing on big scale, like that's the scaling up, not like getting into the corporate store or
Right. Like
getting
how
into
many,
that,
yeah.
like dreaming
Hmm.
up a new system. It's like, no, we have like
Yeah.
ability to do this on our own and like keep it within our our community. So
Which is awesome. I feel like that is one of the gifts that I found of being an entrepreneur is like, yes, there are some things that I don't have a choice about, but there are a lot of things I do get to choose. And there's a lot of it feels very empowering to be able to sometimes make our own rules up. um,
yeah,
which is nice. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely.
Cool. Well, I guess to wrap it up, where can people find you? And what should they do right now because you don't have any meals to sell? Should they follow you? Should they sign up for your email list? How
Well,
can
they
they?
should keep the giveaway
Yes,
ended, but
we need to do that. We need to do the giveaway.
I think I don't know if there's 10 entries on there. So, I mean, there's
Oh,
10 meals to give away. So I think there's still
yeah,
space. Like your odds are pretty high.
it's
Um,
very high.
if you want to try a meal, like this is a really good chance to do that for free. I'll ship it to you. Um, so maybe just go to that original post of my video, watch the video, engage in the comment section, just follow my page. Um, yeah, follow my page, Sky Above Trail Grub, on Instagram, and I'll be releasing like more information there, and that's how you can keep up with like what I'm doing even outside of that. Um, because I also do like retreat catering, private chefing, obviously in the Portland area, but retreat catering anywhere, anything to do with food, like please feel free to like DM me and I'd love to collaborate. But that's like a really good place to reach me. Check out my website. You can get familiar with the food and my story and like the farms I support, where else you can find um, my stuff in the local area. And then my email is on there as well if you wanted to connect that way.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, thank you for being part of the Maker series and being willing to share all of this tonight. It's been awesome to chat and just learn more about you and the business.
Yeah, thanks so much. I'm excited to just connect more with Mappy Hour and folks in the community. So thank you so
Yeah,
much.
cool. All right, bye y'all. We're gonna log off for tonight. Until next time.